And that was designed so that if I have a threat in my environment, it's tethered to that threat. I'm not going to be, if something's coming to attack me, I'm not going to be like, oh, my breathing cadence is a little bit quick. That's not how it works. Why? Because both orbs are linked to that threat. And so my behavior is now actually being driven by something external, even though I think it's internal. And so I don't want to get too abstract here because I'm a neuroscientist, I'm not a theorist. But when you start thinking about models of how the brain works, there are only really three things that neurons do. They're either sensory neurons, they're motor neurons, or they're modulating things.
Welcome to the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy, where you will learn the tips, tricks, and strategies he teaches his world-class clients to give you the skills to dominate any business.
What's going on, Mindset by Design crew, and welcome to episode 393. Hope you're amazing as always and life is treating you beautiful. Do you know what? I was working out what episode to choose today and what clip to choose, who to focus on, and that was the keyword that came up. Focus. Do you know what? With releasing the Unfair Advantage Academy for salespeople and entrepreneurs to really get back to top performance inside of 90 days, one of the big things that keeps coming up is I just can't focus. I can't focus to pick that phone up. I can't focus. I'm overwhelmed, Andy. I just can't. You get it? I can't focus. And it's an interesting thing. I definitely teach lots of systems around focus. I've been able to take people's focus from like 20 minutes to like 6 hours with projects. And it's all to do with brain waves and techniques and there's lots of things I teach, but the truth is, it's a really complex topic. So, who better to bring in than the GOAT himself, the GOAT? It's Andrew Huberman. And if you don't know Andrew Huberman, he runs a department of neurobiology or neurochemistry at Harvard. So. Yeah, you've probably seen him everywhere. He's been on Rogan a million times. I've showcased, I should say, so many of his clips on this podcast, and he's just a badass, and he's a cool guy too, you know. And who better to go to? And focus is really interesting, and I mean that in every capacity. It's really interesting because it's all to do with the brain and the nervous system, external and internal environments. And what we have to get a grip of being an entrepreneur or a salesperson or a solopreneur, whatever you are listening to this, it's what you got to get a grip of is being able to switch on and switch off when you choose. That's the key thing. So if you've got a project in front of you that you've been delaying getting done, or you've got a list of people you're supposed to call, or you've got whatever it is, right? It's way more than discipline. You can't just be disciplined. You've got to learn how to switch on when you choose, because discipline it's absolutely a key element. You've got to be able to be disciplined. I'm not saying that, right? You've got to have black belt Jedi like discipline. But you've also got to be able to understand how the brain is actually performing, because then what you can do is you can develop your own systems about it. That's my point. I teach so many high-level systems to everyone you can imagine. It was interesting. I just was talking to a salesperson, seeing if it was the right fit for them for the academy, and they looked at my testimonials, and it was quite funny. It was quite funny to me. Because what most salespeople and entrepreneurs don't realize is that their business grows because of their ability to remain or stay in peak performance. And peak performance is an absolute science. It's an absolute science. And when you start to understand neurochemistry, when you start to understand neurology and how the brain wires, and then you understand that you are constantly affected by chemicals and patterns, and having the ability to manage those patterns in the utmost levels of pressure and stress is how someone succeeds or not. So when someone sees those testimonials, and that's what he was questioning, and that's fine, it's all good, then what I want people to understand is that how someone performs as a world champion, or moves from 1 million to 65 million, or builds one of the biggest Amazon brands in the world, or goes on as an NBC celebrity, right, who wins a massive competition, or it goes on, right? What I want them to see is how you literally are able, those people are able to perform at the highest level under the most intense pressure. And well, if they can do that, then the systems are able to translate in so many different industries, and they're able to translate to be able to help them in sales or whatever it is, right? Preferably sales right now and entrepreneurism. So that's my intention behind all of this, and why I sometimes you see on my marketing and all the rest of it, it's gives, oh yeah, I've worked with all of these people. Yeah, it's not about me, it's about you. And I just want you to feel safe and be able to trust yourself, because you can trust the systems. That's it. So focus is a huge thing. And I want everybody to live their best life. I want everyone to have freedom, and I want everyone to have a career, whatever it is, man, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, I want you to absolutely love it every day of it, and be at your best. So you can support your family, you can get all the shiny objects that you want, you can travel, you can do whatever it means to you. So, yeah, that's why this episode is quite important. So what we're going to do is jump into it, but remember, why don't you head over to unfairadvantage.online and get what? Well, something really cool. Something really cool. You got the first part, which is you can get the Jedi mind hacks. These are golden bonuses that you're just going to be able to implement instantly in your life and take your whole performance to a whole different level. And then if you want to go to a second step, which is you should, you can access the Sales Ignition or Sales Performance Ignition course. And what that is that's 10 hours of, it's like worth $1,000 on its own, but it's so powerful that I know once you understand these basics, then it's going to change your game. And hey, maybe you'll come and join the academy in the future, but my first priority is helping you. So go and do that now. Unfairadvantage.online, or head over to andymurphy.online. You can go there too. So should we jump in? Let's jump in. Let's go and hang out with Dr. Huberman, and let's learn all about the brain and focus. And I'll see you at the end of the show.
If you read books that describe the habits of brilliant people, like writers, they do control that sensory experience in the hours after wake. Like many writers, they have a particular habit of several hours early in the morning of actual writing. They don't do anything else for the rest of the day, but they control. They're very sensitive to noises and so on. I think they make it very difficult to live with them. I'm definitely like that. Like I love to control the sensory, how much information is coming in. There's something about the peaceful, just everything being peaceful. At the same time, and we're talking to a mutual friend of Whitney Cummings, who has a mansion, a castle on top of a cliff in the middle of nowhere. She actually purchased her own island. So she wants silence. She wants to control how much sound is coming in.
And she's very sensitive to sound and environment.
Yeah.
Beautiful home and environment, but like clearly puts a lot of attention into details. Yeah. And very creative.
Yeah. And that allows her creativity to flourish. I don't like, that feels like a slippery slope. So I enjoy introducing noises and signals and training my mind to be able to tune them out. because I feel like you can't always control the environment so perfectly, because your mind gets comfortable with that. I think it's a skill that you want to learn to be able to shut it off. Like I often go to, like back before COVID, to a coffee shop. It really annoys me when there's sounds and voices and so on, but I feel like I can train my mind to block them out. So it's a balance.
Okay, crew, let me jump in there. Let me jump in. So one of the first things that you have to do, no matter what in performance, is being able to control your environment, right? Obviously, you were talking about focus and all the rest of it, but one of the things that it's so crucial that you control your environment. So some people, like what they've shown is dopamine levels get spiked, so people take massive action, and it's a good thing. Some people work this way in coffee shops, right? So they'll go to the coffee shop. Why? Because I think there's the energetics there too, but there's movement, right? So that makes their brain fire a certain way, which means then they actually perform better, right? So people, they show massive productivity for people who are actually go to coffee shops regularly rather than being at home on their own. But then some people, do you know what I mean, want to be locked in a room on their own with zero noise around them so they can hold their focus, and that means they've got no external triggers, and so they just go into the zone on their own, they go into flow states. So what I want you to do is really work out yourself, because only you know you, right? Only you know you. It's interesting. Alex Hormozy, who I've showed clips with on the podcast many times, but he basically locks himself in this tiny little closet, and so all he's got is a tiny little wall in front of him. He's got headphones on. Nothing is going to distract him, and then he locks in, and that works for some people, right? So you've got to really know you, and if you know you, then you can start customizing or tailoring the environment. Now, this links to anchoring and different trigger responses and stuff like that. But the trick is, once you know you start tailoring your environment. So some people have said to me, well, Andy, I've only got a corner of a room. Okay, so what can we do in that corner of the room? Can we put pictures, paintings, certain colors? How can we organize the desk? Can we, besides all the other routines that we're teaching you to drop into to flow, it's like, what can we do so that corner of that room motivates you? You know what I mean? It's that simple. So first step is know yourself and how you perform.
I think.
Yeah, and I think two things come to mind as you're saying this. First of all, we're talking about what's best for work is not always what's best for completeness of life. I mean, autism is probably many things. Like when we hit autism, just like there are probably 50 ways to get a fever. There are probably 50 ways that the brain can create what looks like autism or what people call autism. But there's an interesting set of studies that have come out of David Ginty's lab at Harvard Med. Looking at, these are mouse mutants where these are models for autism where nothing is disrupted in the brain proper and in the central nervous system, but the sensory neurons, the ones that innervate the skin and the ears and everything, are hypersensitive, and this maps to a mutation in certain forms of human autism. Mm-hmm. So this means that the overload of sensory information and sensory experience that a lot of autistics feel, that they can't tolerate things, and then they get the stereotype behaviors, the rocking and the kind of the shouting. We always thought of that as a brain problem. In some cases it might be, but in many cases it's because they just can't, they seem to have it's like turning the volume up on every sense. And so they're overwhelmed. And none of us want to become like that. I think it's very hard for them, and it's hard for their parents and so forth. So I like the coffee shop example, because the way I think about trying to build up resilience, physically or mentally or otherwise, is one of, I guess we could call it, I like to call it limbic friction. That's not a real scientific term, and I acknowledge that. I'm making it up now because I think it captures the concept, which is that, we always hear about resilience. It makes it sound like, under stress where everything's coming at you, you're going to stay calm. But there's another, so the limbic system wants to pull you in some direction, typically in the direction of reflexive behavior. And the prefrontal cortex, through top-down mechanisms has to suppress that and say, no, we're not going to respond to the banging of the coffee cups behind me, or I'm going to keep focusing. That's pure top-down control. So limbic friction is high in that environment. You've put yourself into a high limbic friction environment, meaning that the prefrontal cortex has to work really hard. But there's another side to limbic friction too, which is when you're very sleepy, there's nothing incoming. It can be completely silent. And it's hard to engage and focus because you're drifting off and you're getting sleepy. So their limbic friction is high, but for the opposite reason, autonomic arousal is too low. So they're turning on Netflix in the background or looping a song might boost your level of alertness that will allow top-down control to be in exactly the sweet spot you want it. So this is why earlier I was saying it's all about how we feel inside relative to what's going on the outside. We're constantly in this. I guess one way you could envision it spatially, especially if people are listening to this just on audio, is I like to think about it kind of like a glass barbell, where one sphere of perception and attention can be on what's going on with me, and one sphere of attention can be on what's going on with you or something else in the room or in my environment. But this barbell isn't rigid. It's not really glass. Would plasma work here? I don't know anything about plasma. Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. But so imagine that this thing can contort. The size of the globes at the end of this barbell can get bigger or smaller. So let's say I close my eyes and I bring all my experience into what's going on through interoception internally. Now it's as if I've got two orbs of perception just on my internal state, but I can also do the opposite and bring both orbs of perception outside me. I'm not thinking about my heart rate or my breathing. I'm just thinking about something I see. And what you'll start to realize as you kind of use this spatial model is that two things. One is that it's very dynamic, and that the more relaxed we are, the more these two orbs of attention, the two ends of the barbell, can move around freely. The more alert we are, the more rigid they're going to be tethered in place. And that was designed so that if I have a threat in my environment, it's tethered to that threat. I'm not going to be, if something's coming to attack me, I'm not going to be like, oh, my breathing cadence is a little bit quick. That's not how it works. Why? Because both orbs are linked to that threat. And so my behavior is now actually being driven by something external, even though I think it's internal.
Okay, cool. Does that make sense? A little bit heady, right? A little bit heady. Literally the head. Literally the head. But does that make sense? So in your environment, in, again, performance focus, right? The key trick to all of this is being in control of your nervous system. Being relaxed, right? Easier said than done, but we got a lot of techniques for you. But if we're relaxed, then this means that we are then flexible. And if we're flexible, it means that then we're not getting stuck. We're not getting stuck focusing on the internal or the external. These barbells, like he calls them, right, are able to maneuver wherever we go. So we can focus inside or what's in front of us without being distracted by the external noises, or the external noises cannot even bother you because you're relaxed inside. So the trick to all of this is being in the parasympathetic nervous system. And if we can do that through brainwaves, through state changing, through just through simple things like even breath, right? But breath affects your nervous system, it affects all of this stuff. So by being in control of these things, then that also relates to sales, right? Because that person in front of you, you might not be relaxed, and their way of seeing the world or their belief system is very rigid because they're nervous. And if they're nervous, then what you're saying to them can really trigger them. Do you know what I mean? It can really trigger them. And so if you can allow them, by building deep rapport or whatever you want to call it, then they are relaxed. Then what you're saying to them is they're going to be able to go internally and externally, and they're going to be able to process at a much higher level what you're saying, which means from an influence and persuasion aspect, what you're able to do then is they're able to hear you, because you're able to also make them feel how you want them to feel for their greater good. good. Does that make sense? So you being relaxed means that you're not going to be affected, and you making sure that your client is relaxed or your prospect is relaxed, then it makes sure that they're going to absorb your information, they're not going to react, and they're not going to be rigid. Does that make sense? So play around with that.
And so I don't want to get too abstract here because I'm a neuroscientist, I'm not a theorist. But when you start thinking about models of how the brain works, there are only really three things that neurons do. They're either sensory neurons, they're motor neurons, or they're modulating things. And the models of attention and perception that we have now, 2020, tell us that we've got interoception and exteroception. They're strongly modulated by levels of autonomic arousal. And that if we want to form the optimal relationship to some task or some pressure or something, whether or not it's sleep, an impending threat, or coding, we need to adjust our internal space-time relationship with the external space-time relationship. And I realize I'm repeating what I said earlier, but we can actually assign circuitry to this stuff. It mostly has to do with how much limbic friction there is, how much you're being pulled to some source. That source could be internal. If I have pain, physical pain in my body, I'm going to be much more interoceptive than I am exteroceptive. You could be talking to me and I'm just going to be thinking about that pain. It's very hard. And the other thing that we can link it to is top-down control, meaning anything in our environment that has a lot of salience will tend to bring us into more exteroception than interoception. And again, I don't want to litter the conversation with just a bunch of terms, but what I think it can be useful for people is to do what essentially you've done, Lex, is to start developing an awareness. When I wake up, am I mostly in a mode of interoception or exteroception? When I work well, what does working well look like from the perspective of autonomic arousal? How alert or calm am I? What kind of balance between internal focus and external focus is there? And to sort of watch this process throughout the day.
So does that make sense? Right. So it's all about limbic friction, right? And then it changes our focus for interoception or exteroception, right? Crazy words, but that's what it is. So we're basically going inside to outside depending on, again, what you're reacting to. So you have to make sure, this is why morning routines are exceptionally important. And they're not, for everybody, the morning routine could be literally getting on their computer and go to work, right? But that means that calms them down. So for other people like myself, going to work straight to work, and if I just wake up, I have to not ease into the day, absolutely not. What I have to do is make sure that I'm switched on. So my nervous system's in the right place, my brain waves in the right place, and the neural nets or the mind muscles, the software is firing in the right place. So that means I'm in a business or work state, right? Because if I'm in a talking to my wife's state, then guess what? That means then I'm not focused on business. If my state is I've just gone training, right, and I've just come back from the gym, but I'm not now in a business state, then where is my focus? Right? What's my belief system? Where's my heart rate? You know what I mean? It's very different versions of us. And that's what people don't understand about different states or how to develop and step into peak states. Because how you do your sports or how you go to the gym is not how you perform inside of a phone call, right? They're very, very different. Although you might be happy in one, happy in the other, but your focus is different, your expectations is different, your language is different, internal and external, right? And that means your nervous system is probably going to be different. If you're training, right, and you're doing hard training, that means that your nervous system is amped up, right? You're in sympathetic, and that's what it needs to be. But when you're talking to somebody and doing a sale, you can't be in that way, because if you are, then they're going to feel pressure, they're going to feel nervousness, and then we go back to what we said in the whole episode. So the trick to this is learning yourself, making sure you're in the correct nervous system, make sure that you're in the correct state or version of you, right? And these are all things I call it pre-design, but these are things we design, we install, and we delete what's stopping you. But that's just a little thing. So hopefully that helps. So the trick to all of this is know yourself and make sure that you're always on fire and focused on whatever it is you're supposed to be doing right now, and make sure that you can give the best to whatever you're doing right now, because life's busy, life's hectic, and if we don't change these states, then you get messy wiring in your brain where emotions and beliefs start linking over to things that we don't want. Does that make sense? Awesome. So there we go, crew. There's the end of episode 393. We're getting closer to that big 400. We're getting closer and closer. So, until the next time, much love. Keep kicking ass. Make sure that you're heading over to the unfairadvantage.online, or head over to andymurphy.online, and make sure that you're getting your Jedi mind hacks, and then make sure that you're jumping into the awesome $1,000 free course that I'm giving you right now, and that's the Sales Ignition. And I'll see you in the Facebook group, and hopefully I will see you in person on a call really soon. Keep kicking ass, and one more thing. Why don't you smile for me?
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy. We'll catch you next time.